The studio lights were bright, almost blinding, casting a sharp glow over the slick desk that separated Pete Hegseth from Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Cameras rolled silently, red lights blinking as the countdown echoed in producers' earpieces. 3 a broken bar ta a broken bar 1. The host welcomed viewers, his voice smooth and controlled, but beneath the surface, the tension was already crackling. Pete adjusted his tie, gripped his pen tightly, and launched into his usual monologue, a forceful, dramatic, filled with buzzwords like woke agenda and leftist lies. Across the table, Jasmine Crockett remained composed, her eyes steady and her posture confident. When it was her turn to speak, she calmly dismantled Pete's claims with direct facts, citing legislation and civil rights data with ease. But every time she began making a point, Pete would cut in, laughing sarcastically, rolling his eyes, or throwing in jabs disguised as questions. Jasmine paused once, offering him a raised eyebrow and a quiet, "If I could finish a broken bar," but Pete kept pushing, louder, more animated. He leaned forward, gesturing dramatically, as if sheer volume could erase her argument. Behind the cameras, producers exchanged uneasy glances. The debate was veering off course, and everyone in the control room could feel the pressure building, like a thunderstorm forming over live television. Jasmine Crockett was mid-sentence, explaining the implications of voter suppression tactics in key states, when Pete Hegseth abruptly cut her off. His voice was louder now, mocking. "You don't even understand the Constitution," he barked with a smug grin, his tone soaked in arrogance. For a brief moment, Jasmine paused, her eyes narrowing, not from confusion, but calculation. The smirk didn't faze her, it fueled her. She leaned forward slightly, her voice cold and sharp. "I do," she said, her words slicing through the air, "maybe better than you ever did." Pete didn't expect that. His grin faltered. He shifted in his seat, clearly irritated. "You're deflecting because you can't answer the question," he snapped. Jasmine remained calm, even as her patience thinned. "No," she replied, her voice still even but with unmistakable edge. "You're deflecting with arrogance and volume." Then it happened. Pete interrupted her yet again, talking over her deliberately, louder this time. Jasmine's hand came up half firm, commanding, and she didn't wait for permission. She raised her voice just enough to be heard clearly over his bluster. "Pete, shut up," she said, each word delivered with ice-cold clarity. "Seriously, I just shut up and let a woman speak for once." The studio went silent. It was as if time paused. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to zoom in or cut away. Pete's mouth hung open, caught somewhere between shock and fury. The host looked like he had swallowed a nail. Behind the scenes, producers were frozen, eyes wide as they listened through their headsets to the stunned silence flooding the control room. No one dared breathe. On live television, Jasmine Crockett had just done the unthinkable, and it was electric. Pete Hegseth's face turned a deep shade of red as he sat rigid in his chair, still reeling from being told to shut up on live national television. His usual smug composure had cracked, and now raw ego poured through. He fumbled with his notes, his hands trembling slightly, then slammed the papers down onto the desk, making the microphones pick up the sharp thud. "This is outrageous," he spat, pointing a finger across the desk at Jasmine. "You come on here with no respect, no manners, and then you have the nerve to tell me to shut up?" His voice was louder now, uncontrolled, shaking with anger. Jasmine didn't move. She didn't blink. Her eyes locked onto him like a steel trap, not with malice, but pure authority. She didn't have to say anything, or her silence made Pete unravel further. He stood halfway from his chair, his blazer rumpled, McWire tugging against his collar. "You people always play the victim card when your arguments collapse," he shouted, his tone now frantic and less coherent. The host leaned in, trying desperately to regain control. "Let's just take a breath," he said, his voice strained, but Pete ignored him completely. "No," Pete barked, "I won't sit here and be disrespected by someone who doesn't even belong at this table." That was it. The control room erupted into chaos. Producers yelled for the delay team, others waved frantic hand signals to the camera operators. But it was too late. The meltdown was happening in real time, and millions were watching. Pete slammed his fist down again, muttering under his breath, his professionalism long gone. The polished Fox News analyst had been replaced by a man whose ego couldn't handle being challenged, especially not by a calm, composed black woman who refused to let him bully her into silence. The power dynamic had flipped, and the world was watching it collapse. As Pete Hegseth finally sank back into his chair, breathing heavily, visibly flustered and sweating under the studio lights, Jasmine Crockett leaned forward slightly. Her voice was calm, steady, and chillingly precise. "This," she said into her mic without raising her tone, "is exactly what women deal with every single day. Being silenced, interrupted, talked over, dismissed. Especially when we're right." The room fell so quiet it felt like even the lights had dimmed. Pete didn't respond. He couldn't. He sat frozen, his mouth slightly open, eyes darting as if he were still trying to recover a comeback that would never come. The host remained awkwardly still, unsure whether to cut to break or let the moment breathe. Jasmine didn't wait. She finished her thought with composure that cut deeper than any insult. "You don't scare me, Pete. And yelling doesn't make you smarter. It just makes you louder." Back in the control room, producers stared at their monitors in disbelief. On social media, it was already too late to contain the explosion. A 14-second clip of Jasmine saying "shut up and let a woman speak for once" had already hit Twitter. Within minutes, it trended globally. Hashtags like #CrockettClapback, #ShutUpPete, and #LiveItVideos took over every platform. TikTok creators added music, dramatic sound effects, and edits with slow-motion zooms on Pete's shocked expression. Major media outlets picked up the clip before the show had even ended. Commentators across the spectrum began weighing in, some calling it a watershed moment for women in politics, others a public humiliation for one of cable news' loudest conservative voices. Meanwhile, Pete cancelled his next 2 media appearances. His team scrambled for statements, blaming technical stress and miscommunication. But none of it mattered. The footage lived on, replayed millions of times across phones, laptops, and television screens. Jasmine Crockett, however, didn't gloat. In her next interview, when asked if she regretted telling Pete to shut up, she simply smiled and said, "Number. Because sometimes the truth isn't polite, it's necessary." And with that, she walked off the set, not as a guest but as a legend.